Hello everyone, and welcome to game number 6 of the 1971 candidates match between Bobby Fischer and Mark Taimanov. Now, as you've seen in my 5 previous videos, or even more if you've seen the older versions, Mark Taimanov is definitely in a terrible position. He lost 5 games in a row to Bobby, and he has to now win 5 games in a row to just break even, as this is a 10 games match. So if Fischer even draws one game or wins one more game, the match is over. So that being said, it's very unlikely that Mark Taimanov will be able to do this, or, as this already happened, that he could have done anything there. But as much as he can lower the humiliation of the Soviet Union, that will definitely go in his favor. So in this game, sorry about that. Bobby again had the white pieces, and once again they go for the Sicilian, E4 and C5. So it's very interesting. In the 3 games Fischer had the black pieces, 2 of them went for a King's Indian defense, but for the 3rd game Fischer decided to go for a different line. As you remember, he went for the line he played against Meking in the Buenos Aires tournament, and with the white pieces, Taimanov always opted for the Sicilian, and they always opted for the same line. So knight to f3, knight c6, d4, c captures, knight captures, and e6. Taimanov goes for the Taimanov variation. Knight b5 by Fischer, same as in game 2. d6, bishop to f4, e5. This is all the same as they already played in game 2. Bishop to e3, knight to f6. Fischer now seemingly wastes the tempo, but it's all very meaningful. And now the first move that will differentiate from game number 2, it's bishop to e6. As you remember, in game 2, queen a5 check was played, and then after Fischer blocked, as the knight is no longer pinned, the queen is not on d8, we had captures, queen captures on a5, captures here, and bishop back to e3, and it was a very nice game for both of them, but Fischer was able to win it after that prolonged adjournment twice. So okay, bishop g5, we have bishop to e6, knight 1 to c3, a6, as here knight to d5 would be a threat, pressuring the c7 square, so a6, kicking the knight back, and then now bishop captures on f6, g captures on f6. Of course, not queen captures to allow knight c7 check, wins the game for white, so bishop to f6, g captures on f6, and now comes knight to a3. We have knight to d4. A very nice move, as Taimanov really, once again, came really prepared for this game. So b5 is alright here, pretty much an idea that you would use in Alaska Sicilian. But here, knight d4, a prepared variation by Taimanov, which really is very troublesome for white. For example, if you simply continued bishop to c4, hoping to trade here and bring this knight into the game, then Taimanov has this beautiful pawn sacrifice prepared, d5. Which opens up an attack from the bishop to the knight on a3. And after knight captures, rook to c8, attacking the bishop. The bishop moves, and now rook to g8, and with these 2 beautiful active rooks, Taimanov definitely has more than enough compensation for the pawn. But Fischer decides not to go for anything like this. Instead, he goes knight to c4. Now d5 isn't such a big deal, because there is no knight on a3 for Taimanov's bishop to attack. But this is what Taimanov was prepared for. He pushes f5. So generally f5, this is beautiful if you can play this with black. E captures on f5, knight captures on f5, and now bishop to d3. We have rook to c8, bishop captures on f5, and now, as the knight is unguarded, rook captures on c4. Bishop captures on e6, and now f captures on e6. You can see that Taimanov came really prepared, queen to h5 being a threat, but really does nothing for white. Taimanov's king would simply castle artificially and would be very safe on the queen side. So after f captures on e6, queen e2 by Fischer. And here, Taimanov is still in the driver's seat, and here he played rook to d4. Seemingly a very active move, prevents Fischer from castling queenside, and it's a very nice active square for the rook, but much better would have been rook to f4. Now, castling queenside would run into queen to g5, also a very nice move that threatens discoveries and also attacks the g2 pawn, and castles kingside would run into rook to g8, so this is a lot of pressure here. The queen coming into the game would be very unpleasant for Fischer. But okay, rook to d4 was played, and now Fischer continues. We have castles, queen to g5, and now rook 8 to d1. Queen to f5, Rook captures, pawn captures, and knight to e4. Bishop to e7, and here rook to d1. And here Taimanov really runs into some problems. There's really no good way to defend the d4 pawn here. If you defend it with the bishop, knight can simply capture, and then the queen will come and help out with an attack with queen e4, attacking the b7 pawn as well. This e5 seems like a reasonable move, but simply rook captures on d4. Nothing to do here. And now there's a double attack against the d6 pawn. If you capture the rook, knight d6 check, picks up the queen, the bishop on e7 is pinned from the queen on e2. So here, queen e5, defending but not for long. Fischer plays queen to d3, we have rook f8, and now queen captures on d4. Queen captures and rook captures. d5 and the knight to c3. And after all is said and done, once again Taimanov came really prepared, Fischer defended really well, and we are now in the endgame, where Fischer is up a pawn, but okay, Taimanov has a bishop against a knight. So far Fischer has been proving how a bishop is better than a knight. Here Fischer has to prove that a knight is better than a bishop. Bishop to c5, attacking the rook, rook d2, and now rook to f4. We have g3, rook to c4, rook to c3, 4, knight to e2, and now comes the rook a4, attacking the a2 pawn. a3, king to d7, and now comes king g2. Of course, activating the king, getting it away from a dark square. b5, and now c3. We have a5, knight to d4, and here b4. And here we have a very nice moment where Fischer really displays how strong of a player he is and how powerful he was in this entire series for his conquest of the throne. Knight to b3, attacking the bishop on c5. Here, bishop to b6 is played, and here comes c4. First captures on b4, captures, and now c4, as the pawn on d5 is pinned. We have king to c6, and now again a very nice move, c5. Of course, you cannot capture. If you capture, rook to c2 wins the bishop, as you cannot defend with the rook. The knight is guarding the a5 square. So bishop to c7, and now again knight to d4 check. Again, you cannot capture here. If you capture the pawn, then you get knight d6 check, king b6, knight captures, king captures, and rook captures on d5. Fischer is up 2 pawns, so an easily winning endgame. After knight d4, king to d7 was played. Now comes f4. Keeping an eye on e5. We have e5, and now comes c6 with check. King to d6 would lose you the game. For example, f captures, and now if king captures, you get knight b5. You attack the bishop. Bishop has to move. Now you get rook e2 check. King has to move, and now c7. Rook has to block. Simply rook to c2, and it's all over. If you want to stop promotion, you have to block with the rook. Rook blocks, but now rook to c6 check will pick up the bishop, and it's all over. So after c6, you cannot go here, you have to go back. King to c8 was played by Taimanov, and then now comes knight to b5, opening up a discovered attack from the rook to the d5 pawn. Rook to a2. If rook captures on d5, rook will capture on b2. Now Fischer simply pushes f5. He creates another passed pawn. Bishop to d8, and now rook to d5, capturing a pawn. We have rook captures on b2, and it was in this position that the game was adjourned. So I don't think it's known what move Fischer played, or he put in his little envelope, probably a king h3. But it doesn't matter, as this position is completely winning for white, and it was in fact in this position that Mark Taimanov resigned game 6 without ever continuing it. Why did he resign? Well, he's down in material. Fischer has a much better position after he moves away from check. Whatever black plays, whatever plan he chooses, for example, if he starts pushing his own passed pawn, then comes rook to c7. Now you can see that a check is coming, and this will win you the bishop. So there's really nothing to do. You can prepare to push the pawn, but after check, move, you can capture. King captures, and now you push another passed pawn. b2, for example, f7 is coming. Now a queen comes into the game, and white brings also a queen into the game. But now, as you can see, black has no ways of delivering any checks. The f1 square is guarded by the queen from f8, and whatever move black plays, it will be a simple win for white. For example, rook b8 check, picking up the queen, and it's all over. A queen against a rook, easily winning. But of course, Taimanov knew this, and after he captured on b2, the game was adjourned. He decided to resign this with all the dignity in the world. even though he lost the match 6-0. But yeah, there is no point in continuing this, and even though there are rumors of some players deciding to postpone their loss for one more day, so the newspapers, for example, wouldn't say he lost. Maybe they would say it over the weekend or something. But yeah, regardless, I did prepare something for us to check out after this game, as a lot of you have requested it. So here it is. This is something very important for this match. So I will read it, as a lot of my viewers are watching this from their smartphones or mobile devices, but you can also just pause the video here and read it yourself, or you can simply skip it if you're not into increasing your vast knowledge. But for those of you who are interested, this is something we already used as a quote. Until the match with Fischer in 1971, everything went smoothly in my chess career. This dramatic match changed my life into hell, says Mark Taimanov. As Fischer himself admitted at the time, the final score did not reflect the true balance of strength. The terrible feeling that I was playing against a machine which never made any mistake shattered my resistance. Fischer would never concede any weakening of his position. He was an incredibly tough defender. The third game proved to be the turning point of the match. After a pretty tactical sequence, I had managed to set my opponent serious problems. In a position that I considered to be winning, I could not find a way to break through his defenses. For every promising idea, I found an answer for Fischer. I engrossed myself in a very deep think, which did not produce any positive result. Frustrated and exhausted, I avoided the critical line in the end and lost the thread of the game, which led to my defeat eventually. He talks about the Queen H3 move in Game 3, which he did not play, which would most likely lead to a much better game, and he really did well in positions like that. So if he played it, it's hard to say what would happen, but it would be a much better line than the one he played, returning the knight back to f3. 10 years later, I found at last how I should have won that fatal game, but unfortunately it did not matter anymore. I have written a book about this match entitled How I Became Fischer's Victim. It represents an essay on the American player and describes how I perceived his style and personality. Once the match was over, the sanctions from the Soviet government were severe. I was deprived of my civil rights, my salary was taken away from me, I was prohibited from traveling abroad and censored in the press. It was unthinkable for the authorities that a Soviet grandmaster could lose in such a way to an American, without a political explanation. I therefore became the object of slander and was accused, among other things, of secretly reading books of Solzhenitsyn. Can't really read that. I was banned from society for 2 years. It was also the time when I separated from my first wife, Lyubov Bruk. So that being said, I do hope you enjoyed that, but for those of you who really want to increase your vast knowledge, there is also something we must include here. This is an interview with Taimanov's coach at the time, Evgeny Vasyukov, who prepared him for his game against Bobby Fischer. So I will also read that. I will put a link to it in the description below where you can check it out, but it's from a Russian website. This is something that was sent to me by a subscriber via email in English. So, to start with, how I became Taimanov's trainer. Mark and I have played in an international tournament in Reykjavik that was held in 1968. We, by the way, shared first and second place, gathering 10.5 points out of 15. We got along in Iceland and established friendly relations, says Evgeny Vasyukov. Right before the USSR Championship has started in 1969, the one that would qualify the participants for the Mallorca Interzonal tournament. Mark and I have agreed that the one who would qualify for the Interzonal would take another one as a coach. Taimanov had luck. He defeated Lutikov in the last round's puzzling game, and we went to Mallorca. Taimanov's performance in Mallorca was also successful. He shared 5th to 6th place with Ullman and won the right to play in the candidates matches. So just think of it. His opponent in the quarterfinal was Fischer, who has scored an excellent result in Mallorca, gathering 18.5 out of 23, and easily took clear first, leaving his rivals Geller and Larsen. They've shared 2nd and 3rd place, 3.5 points behind. Now he would face the hardest trial, the match against Fischer in Vancouver. Our preparation was very good. We've analyzed Americans' 500 games. On the basis of this material, we've composed Fischer's creative portrait. Our characteristic of Fischer was approved by Botvinnik, who called it deep and correct. In short, I believe that Taimanov was well prepared for the match. We together with Taimanov went to Canada, I as a second, and Yuri Balashov, who specially studied Fischer's work as a coach. The Grandmaster Alexander Kotov headed the delegation. So as you can see, Taimanov had a lot of support from the Soviets and he was very well prepared. The match has started, Taimanov lost the first game. The second game was adjourned in the worst position, but when the game was resumed, we caught Fischer on a trick and the game was again adjourned in an absolutely drawn position. The day of the third game came. During the preparation, I found an improvement in the variation of King's Indian, which has been played by Fischer, so Taimanov got a comfortable position after applying it. We saw an almost knocking out move, but time passed and Mark didn't play it. Eventually, tired of calculations, Taimanov made a wrong move, Fischer intercepted the initiative and won the game. Taimanov was so depressed after this loss that he blundered and lost in the resumed second game. The score of the match showed 0-3 and then it became a one-sided contest. Fischer grew stronger as the match progressed, while Taimanov had just thrown away his rook in the fifth game. As a result, a whitewash 0-6. Why did that happen? Of course, Fischer was much stronger, but as even he has admitted, the final result of the match did not illustrate the real correlation of forces. Taimanov had to lose, but not in such a crushing manner. A significant role in this fiasco played Taimanov's malnutrition during this match, owing to which he just physically couldn't stand the workload. So this is something Vasyukov wants us to know. He was malnourished because he wanted to save money in order to buy some things he couldn't buy in USSR. As long as I knew that Mark had a rare appetite, I noticed that he was malnourished. So I told him that he shouldn't be economizing on food, that it's very important for being able to stand 5-hour tension during the game. Fortunately, we, the members of the delegation, received from the sports committee of USSR the normal daily subsistence for those times, $11 American per each, while Taimanov was getting even more from the organizer of the match, Millionaire Prentice, so he could eat properly, not denying oneself anything. So very interesting that the Soviet Union gave Taimanov seconds and coaches $11 per day. So I know times were different, but that really does not sound much. However, he didn't pay attention to me and continued saving. He never visited the restaurant out of our 5-star hotel, which was one story lower. During the match, Balashov and I, having a kitchen in our room, were buying all kinds of products in the supermarket and fed up excessively economical Mark. Does it sound like nonsense? Yes, unfortunately that happened. So here we had a nice interview with Taimanov and also a nice interview with Evgeny Vasyukov, who was Taimanov's coach and mentor for this match against Fischer. So a lot of things could have played a role, but regardless of all of this, I don't think that you would be able to win against such a strong player like Mark Taimanov, with anything other than simply being better. Okay, perhaps 0-6 is a bit unrealistic, but I mean, you all saw the games, you all saw how well Fischer played. I mean, it's I just wanted you to see this so you could decide for yourselves. But yeah. It's also a famous saying Taimanov said after he lost 0-6 to Bobby Fischer. He said, at least I still have my music, as both him and his wife Lyuba Bruk were pianists. So here is a photo of them playing pianos, and I will also include 2 links in the description below where you can listen to a song on a piano played by Mark Taimanov and his wife. And perhaps, I know, I have no idea who these channels belong to, but, feel free to write something nice for Taimanov, as he really produced some wonderful games against Fischer, regardless of the 0-6 result. So yeah, I hope I covered the 1971 candidates match versus Taimanov fairly well. I do hope you enjoyed it, and that you will keep enjoying the series. We are now heading into the 1971 candidates match, Fischer versus Bent Larsen. His old nemesis. So yeah, it's gonna be very interesting, and yeah, I would like to thank Ingenious, Dame Pletvarec, Hector Coronado, Cristo Caraste, and Quanish Raimbeko for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching. I'm gonna check a couple of your suggestions, see what's happening in the chess world, and then we're just gonna continue with our Bobby Fischer series. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.